My fiancée and her parents insulted my dead mom at the rehearsal dinner. I canceled the wedding in front of 100 people. But when I discovered she stole her locket, justice was brutal. I'm 33 years old, work in corporate finance, and 3 weeks ago I called off my wedding literally at the rehearsal dinner in front of like 100 people after my ex-fiancée's parents spent the entire night insulting my late mom's memory. And the crazy thing is that my mom was the one who basically saved those ungrateful people's business years ago, so the irony is brutal. But anyway, let me start from the beginning because this is a long story and I need you to understand why I did what I did. I met Emily about 6 years ago at a business conference in Chicago. I was 27 and she was 26. And honestly, there was immediate chemistry. You know, one of those connections that feels natural from the first moment. She was smart, ambitious. We had the same professional goals, and the first few months were amazing. The problem, and looking back, I should have seen this as the giant red flag it was, is that her family was always a complicated topic. Her parents, Philip and Angela, own an Italian restaurant on the north side of the city, a fancy place that attracts a lot of people with money, and from day one, they had this superiority attitude that made my skin crawl. Philip is one of those guys who talks loud, has opinions about everything, and always has to be the center of attention, while Angela is more passive-aggressive. Like she insults you but with a smile, and then says you're overreacting if you get offended. My mom, Rose, passed away 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, and it still hurts so much that sometimes I can't even think about her without getting a lump in my throat. She was the most generous and caring person I've ever known. Worked her whole life as an accountant, raised my sister and me practically alone after my dad injured his back and couldn't work full-time. And she never complained about anything. She was always there for everyone. Not just for us, but for anyone who needed help. And that includes, and here comes the important part, Emily's family. Turns out that about 4 years ago, when Emily and I had already been together for a couple of years and things were getting serious, Philip and Angela's restaurant was going through a horrible financial crisis. I don't remember all the exact details because Emily didn't tell me much, but basically they had made bad investments, had debts with suppliers, and the bank was denying them loans because their credit was a disaster. Philip is terrible with money, honestly, spends on unnecessary things all the time but then complains he doesn't have enough. The thing is, they needed like $50,000 urgently or they were going to lose the restaurant. And Emily was desperate, crying in my apartment, saying her family was going to end up on the street. My mom, who was a loving person but also very pragmatic, offered to co-sign a loan for $30,000 to help them. And not only that, when the restaurant's industrial oven broke down a year later, she paid them the $12,000 a new one cost because, in her words, your girlfriend's family is your family too. Oh, and she also paid 2 full years of college tuition for Justin, Emily's older brother, because the guy had lost his scholarship and Philip and Angela didn't have money for tuition. We're talking about like another $20,000 or more. Total. My mom gave them or helped them with more than $60,000 over the course of 3 years, and she did it without expecting anything in return. Just because she wanted Emily and me to be happy, and because she genuinely wanted to help. Philip and Angela were always kind of weird with her after that, like they treated her well when they saw her, but I could feel there was like this underlying tension, as if it bothered them to have had to ask her for help, or as if they felt my mom had some kind of power over them for having helped them financially. My mom never threw what she did for them in their faces. I never mentioned the money or made them feel bad, but still, there was this discomfort that I didn't quite understand at the time. Emily always downplayed my concern and said they were like that with everyone, that it wasn't personal, and I like an idiot believed her because I was in love and wanted things to work out. When my mom died 2 years ago, it was literally the worst moment of my life. It was all very fast. From diagnosis to her death, only 4 months passed, and I still feel like I didn't have time to process anything. Philip and Angela went to the funeral, of course, and said all the appropriate things, that she was a wonderful woman, that they would miss her, blah blah blah. But I don't know. There was something fake about all of it that bothered me, but I couldn't identify exactly what it was. Emily was there for me during those terrible months. I'm not going to deny it. She supported me a lot, and I thought that meant we could get through anything together. About a year after my mom died, I proposed to Emily on a trip we took to Napa Valley. It was very romantic and all that, and she said yes, obviously, and we started planning the wedding. This is where things started getting really weird. I wanted to incorporate things that honored my mom in the ceremony, like having her photo somewhere, using her favorite song, small details that meant a lot to me, and Emily always found some excuse to minimize or dismiss my ideas. That it was too sad to have photos of dead people at a wedding, that my mom wouldn't have wanted us to get melancholic on a happy day, that her parents thought it was in bad taste. Basically anything to avoid my mom having a presence on our special day. I swallowed my frustration because I didn't want to fight, and because, honestly, I thought maybe Emily had a point, and I was being too sentimental. My dad and my sister told me it wasn't normal for Emily to react like that it was my wedding too, and I had the right to honor my mom, however I wanted, but I kept trying to be understanding and flexible. See where I'm going with this? The signs were there, huge and obvious, but I was too deep in the relationship to see them clearly. The wedding was planned for the Saturday 3 weeks ago, and the rehearsal dinner was going to be the Friday before. Philip and Angela insisted they would organize it at a friend's restaurant, a super elegant and expensive place downtown, and that they would invite some important people from their social circle in addition to close family and the wedding party. I thought it was a generous gesture on their part, especially considering everything my mom had done for them, although I should have suspected there was some hidden motive, because Philip never does anything without expecting something in return. We arrived at the restaurant that Friday night, and there were like 100 people there. I'm not exaggerating, 100 people at a rehearsal dinner that was supposed to be for close family. Most were important clients of Philip and Angela's restaurant, Emily's business colleagues, Justin's friends, and there were very few people from my side. My dad was there with his new wife, my sister with her husband, some cousins, my 2 groomsmen, and that was basically it. From the moment I arrived, I felt something was wrong. Like the layout of the place was weird, and there was this vibe that I was almost an extra at my own rehearsal dinner. You know what I mean? Philip had prepared a speech, because obviously he had to be the center of attention, and when he stood up with his champagne glass to speak, I still had no idea what was coming. He started talking about Emily, how proud he was of her, how she had built a successful career in marketing, how beautiful she looked. All very nice. But then he started talking about me, and the tone changed completely. He said something like, and I swear, this is almost verbatim, well, Emily chose Jonathan here. And although he comes from a very different background than ours, and although he clearly doesn't have the same level of professional success as our daughter, we're sure he'll find a way to keep her happy. The entire table went silent, and I felt blood rushing to my face. My sister grabbed my arm under the table, and I could feel the tension from where my dad and his friends were sitting. Emily was there smiling as if nothing weird had happened, and Philip continued with his speech saying other things with that same condescending tone, like he hoped I would learn a lot from being in a family like theirs. That they clearly had a lot to teach me about how the world of successful business works. But the worst, the absolutely worst, came after when Angela stood up to give her own speech. She started talking about how excited she was for the wedding, how beautiful everything was going to be. And then, and this is where my world literally fell apart, she said something about how relieved she was that she wouldn't have to deal with Jonathan's mom being so meddling and involved in their lives anymore. She said, and again this is almost word for word, fortunately Rose is no longer here to get in the way of the wedding preparations, because God knows that woman had no boundaries and always wanted to be involved in things that didn't concern her. The entire restaurant froze. Philip laughed. That kind of uncomfortable laugh when someone says something inappropriate but they don't want to admit it was inappropriate. And then he added something about how my mom had always been too protective of me, and that it was good. I finally had the opportunity to mature without her hovering. Angela nodded and said yes. That sometimes parents don't know when to take a step back, especially single mothers who put their whole lives into their children, and that she had always felt Rose was too controlling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom, the woman who had saved their business, who had paid for their oven, who had paid for their son's college, the woman who had died barely 2 years ago and who I still cried for every night, was being insulted and ridiculed in public by these 2 ungrateful and horrible people. I looked at Emily, expecting her to say something, anything, to defend my mom or at least ask her parents to stop, but she was just sitting there looking at her plate as if nothing was happening. I stood up from the table so fast I knocked over my chair. Everyone looked at me, and the restaurant went completely silent. I told Philip, in front of all those 100 guests, that my mom was 10 times the person he or Angela would ever be, that she had saved their pathetic restaurant when they were about to lose everything due to their incompetence, that she had paid thousands of dollars to help his family without ever asking them for anything in return, and that the only meddling and boundaryless people in that room were the two of them for not having even an ounce of gratitude or decency. Philip turned red and started yelling at me that I didn't know who I was talking to, that it was his event and his money paying for that dinner, and I yelled back that his event was paid for with my dead mom's money, because without her, he'd be on the street with no business. Angela started crying, those fake tears that women cry when they want to play victim, and Emily finally stood up and grabbed my arm, telling me to calm down, that I was ruining everything, that people were watching us. I told her I didn't care who was watching us, that her parents had just insulted my mom's memory in the cruelest way possible, and that she hadn't said absolutely anything to defend her or to defend me. Emily started saying I was overreacting, that her parents hadn't said anything so terrible, that they were just trying to lighten the mood with some casual comments. And in that moment I knew with total clarity that I couldn't marry this woman. My dad and my sister stood up with me, and the three of us left the restaurant. I could hear people murmuring, probably thinking I was the crazy dramatic guy who had ruined a perfectly nice dinner, but honestly I didn't care what they thought. We stayed outside for like 10 minutes. My sister was furious, telling me she'd always known Emily's family was trash. My dad was asking me if I was okay and if we needed to go home. And I was just thinking about my mom and how much I missed her and how angry she would be if she knew how they had talked about her. But then I realized something. If I left now, without saying anything else, all those 100 guests were going to think I was the problematic one, that I'd had an unjustified tantrum, and Philip and Angela were going to control the narrative, saying I was unstable or exaggerating. So I took a deep breath, told my dad and sister to come back in with me, and I went back to the restaurant. All eyes were on me when I walked in. Emily was standing talking to her parents, probably, trying to do damage control, and when she saw me, she made desperate gestures for me to come over. I stood in the middle of the restaurant, grabbed an empty glass from a table, and tapped it against a bottle to get everyone's attention, not elegant but effective, and I said loud and clear, so everyone could hear me, that I had decided to cancel the wedding. The place exploded in murmurs and gasps. Emily stood there with her mouth open like a fish out of water. Philip started yelling at me that I was ungrateful and a coward. Angela was crying louder now, and I just kept talking. I said I couldn't marry someone who allowed their family to insult and disrespect my deceased mom, that I couldn't tie my life to a family that didn't have a gram of gratitude for everything my mom had done for them, and that I'd rather be alone the rest of my life than be part of something so toxic and full of hypocrisy. I looked at Emily directly and told her I hoped she and her wonderful family would be very happy together. Told my guests I was very sorry for making them come all this way for nothing, and I left the restaurant with my dad and sister following me. I could hear the chaos I'd left behind, people yelling, Emily crying, Philip saying who knows what, but I got in my sister's car and we left. The next day I woke up to literally hundreds of messages. Emily had sent me like 50 texts begging me to talk, that it had been a misunderstanding, that her parents hadn't meant to offend my mom, that they were willing to apologize, blah blah blah. Philip had sent me a super long message calling me immature and saying I had ruined his family's reputation in front of very important people, as if that was my problem. Angela had left me like 5 voicemails crying and saying I had misinterpreted everything. Justin, the brother who went to college thanks to my mom's money, sent me a message calling me a dramatic asshole. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I blocked everyone except Emily because I needed to tell her some things face to face. I told her she could come to my apartment on Sunday afternoon and we would talk, but that there was no going back with the wedding. She arrived a mess, smeared makeup, eyes swollen from crying, and started begging me to reconsider. She said her parents were difficult, but that she loved me. I asked her why she hadn't said anything when her parents were insulting my mom. I asked her why, during all the months of planning the wedding, She had minimized every attempt of mine to honor my mom. And you know what she told me? That she hadn't wanted to cause drama, that she knew her parents and knew that if she confronted them, they would get worse, that she had thought it was better to let them say what they wanted and that later things would calm down on their own. I told her that was exactly the problem, that she always chose to keep the peace with her horrible parents instead of defending me or defending the memory of the woman who had saved her family. I told her I couldn't be with someone who was so cowardly and who clearly didn't have the backbone to be on my side when things got tough. She cried more and told me I was punishing her for her parents' mistakes, and I told her no, that I was letting her go for her own mistakes, for her own lack of character. She stayed there for like another half hour trying to convince me, but I had already made my decision. When she finally realized I wasn't going to change my mind, she left, slamming the door and yelling at me that I was going to regret it, that I was going to end up alone and miserable, that I had thrown away 6 years over a stupid comment her parents had made. A stupid comment. That's what she called it, as if insulting my dead mom was something trivial. 2 days later, I realized something was wrong. I have a box with my mom's things, like jewelry, photos, letters she wrote me before she died, things that are priceless to me, and I keep it in my bedroom closet. I went to look for the locket my mom always wore, a beautiful gold piece with photos of my sister and me from when we were kids, because I wanted to have it close during those difficult days, and it wasn't there. I checked the whole box 3 times, searched all over the apartment thinking maybe I had taken it out and left it somewhere, but nothing. It wasn't there. I called Emily and asked her directly if she knew anything about the locket. At first, she denied it, said she didn't know what I was talking about, but I knew she was lying because I knew her well after 6 years. I told her if she didn't tell me the truth, I was going to file a police report, and she finally admitted that yes, she had taken the locket like 2 months ago because she wanted to feel connected to me and my mom, that she had thought about wearing it at the wedding as her something, old or something borrowed. I don't remember the exact excuse because I was so furious, I could barely process what she was telling me. I yelled at her. How dare she take something so personal without my permission? That locket was literally the only physical thing I had left of my mom besides photos, and to give it back to me immediately. She said she had it at her parents' house, in her childhood bedroom, and that she could have Justin bring it to me. I told her no, that I was going to go personally to pick it up, because I didn't trust any of them. I went to Philip and Angela's house the next day. Philip opened the door and tried to close it in my face, but I put my foot in and told him I was coming for my mom's locket, and I wasn't leaving until I had it. Angela appeared behind him and started with her usual drama, that I was a stalker, that they were going to call the police, that I had no right to show up at their house, and I just told them their daughter had stolen an invaluable piece of jewelry that belonged to my dead mom, and that either they gave it back to me right now, or yes, they were going to have to call the police but to explain why they had stolen property. Emily came down the stairs with the locket in her hand and gave it to me without saying anything. I checked it to make sure it was intact, and thank God it was. And I left that house without saying goodbye or thanking them because I didn't owe those horrible people anything. That was the last time I saw Emily or anyone in her family. I blocked everyone on everything. Phone, social media, email, everything. I changed the locks on my apartment in case Emily got it in her head to try to get in. Although technically she never had keys, but better safe than sorry. My sister told me Emily had been calling her and sending her messages, trying to convince her to talk to me, but my sister just blocked her too. My dad told me he was proud of me for defending my mom and for not letting myself be manipulated into staying in such a toxic relationship. It's been 3 weeks since all this. I lost the deposit on the wedding venue, obviously, which was like $5,000, and also the catering deposit. But honestly, I don't care about the money. What I care about is that I defended my mom, that I didn't let those horrible people disrespect her without consequences, and that I saved myself from what would have been a miserable marriage with someone who clearly didn't love me enough to set boundaries with her toxic family. Some mutual friends Emily and I have contacted me saying she's devastated, that she doesn't understand why I reacted so strongly, that she thinks maybe with couples therapy we could fix things. But there's nothing to fix. You can't fix disrespect toward the dead, you can't fix cowardice, and you can't fix a family that is fundamentally selfish and ungrateful. My mom deserved better than that, and so do I. Sometimes I wonder what my mom would say if she could see everything that happened. I think she would be sad that the relationship didn't work out, because she really wanted me to be happy with Emily, but I also think she would be proud that I didn't let myself get trampled on. My mom was soft and generous, but she also had clear boundaries about what she was willing to tolerate, and she raised me to know when to walk away from people who don't value you. Now I'm focusing on myself, on my work, on spending time with my dad and sister, on processing this whole mess and healing. My mom's locket is on my nightstand, and I look at it every night before I go to sleep. Sometimes I still wake up thinking it was all a weird dream and that the wedding is still on, but then I remember what happened at that restaurant and I know I made the right decision. I don't regret anything, honestly. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't respect me or respect the people I love, living or dead.